It was a Tuesday morning in late October when my granddaughter said the 7 words that stopped my heart. I had driven up to my son's house in Columbus to drop off a birthday gift for her. She was turning 8 the following weekend, and I remember standing at the front door with a wrapped box under my arm, smiling like any grandfather would. My daughter-in-law answered. She said my son was at work. She let me in without much warmth, the way she always did, and pointed toward the backyard where my granddaughter was playing alone on the tire swing. I walked out through the sliding glass door and called her name. She looked up and her face did that thing I loved, that full-body brightness, like somebody had turned a light on inside her. She jumped off the swing and ran toward me, and I crouched down to catch her the way I had since she was 3 years old. We sat together on the back porch steps for a while. I gave her the gift. She held it in her lap but didn't tear into it the way kids usually do. She seemed quieter than normal, slower. I assumed she was tired. Then she looked up at me with those big brown eyes and said, "Grandpa, can you ask Mom to stop putting things in my juice?" I didn't move. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" I kept my voice steady. I had spent 31 years as a civil engineer. I was trained to stay calm when things started to crack. She shrugged the way 8-year-olds do when they don't have the vocabulary for something that's been bothering them. "The juice she gives me before bed. It tastes different. And then I sleep really, really long. And sometimes I don't remember the morning." I set my hand on her back. I could feel my own pulse in my throat. "How long has she been giving you the juice?" I asked. She thought about it. "Since summer, I think." It was October. I told her I loved her. I told her everything was fine. I told her to go ahead and open her present, and I watched her unwrap it with those small, careful hands. And I smiled at all the right moments. And inside, I was somewhere else entirely. My daughter-in-law came to the door twice while we sat there. Both times she looked at my granddaughter in a way I couldn't name then, but have thought about many times since. Watchful. Measuring. I left 20 minutes later. I sat in my truck at the end of the street for a long time before I drove anywhere. My wife passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 41 days from diagnosis to the end. She was the person I would have called. She was always the one who knew what to do when something felt wrong but couldn't be proven. I sat there in that truck on a Tuesday morning in October, and I missed her so badly it felt like a physical weight on my chest. Then I put the truck in drive and went to find a doctor. I called my own physician first, a man I'd seen for over a decade, and I explained the situation in a parking lot outside a pharmacy. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "You need to get her tested. Blood and urine. Today if you can. Tell them you suspect possible ingestion of a sedative." He said it calmly. The word sedative landed on me like a stone dropped into still water. I drove back to my son's house. My daughter-in-law answered the door again, and I told her I wanted to take my granddaughter out for lunch, just the two of us, a birthday tradition. I smiled when I said it. I have never worked so hard to hold a smile in my life. She hesitated. She asked when we'd be back. I said a couple of hours. She looked at my granddaughter and then back at me, and something passed across her face that I couldn't read. "Fine," she said. "Be back by 3. In the car, I told my granddaughter we were going to make a quick stop before lunch. I told her she might have to give a little blood, like at her regular checkup, and that it would be fast. She wrinkled her nose, but she didn't complain. She never really complained about anything, and I had always thought that was just her temperament. I was beginning to understand it might be something else. The urgent care clinic was on the west side of Columbus. The nurse at the front desk was a heavy-set woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain, and she looked at me, a 63-year-old man in a flannel shirt bringing in a child who was not his own daughter, with a careful expression. I leaned close to the desk and I said quietly, "Her grandfather. I have reason to believe she may have been given something without her knowledge. I need a full tox screen." She held my gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she picked up her phone. We were seen within 15 minutes. The doctor who came in was a young woman with her hair pulled back and no-nonsense eyes. She asked my granddaughter a few gentle questions while she examined her. What did she like to eat? Did she play any sports? How was she sleeping lately? My granddaughter said she slept a lot. She said she felt tired most mornings, even after sleeping a full night. She said sometimes she woke up and couldn't remember what had happened the night before. The doctor's face did not change. She was very good. She asked me to step into the hallway. I kissed the top of my granddaughter's head and told her I'd be right outside the door. In the hallway, the doctor spoke in a low, measured voice. She said the symptoms were consistent with chronic low-dose sedative use in a child. She said the talk screen would confirm. She said she was required to contact Children's Services if the results came back positive. I told her I understood. I told her to make the call. Then I went back inside and sat with my granddaughter while she ate a small bag of crackers the nurse had brought her, and we talked about her upcoming birthday, and which flavor of cake she wanted, and whether she thought her dad would finally let her get a dog. She wanted a golden retriever. She had wanted one for 2 years. I told her I thought that sounded like a very good idea. The results came back that afternoon. The doctor sat across from me in a small consultation room with a printout in her hand and a stillness in her face that told me everything before she spoke a word. The screen had come back positive for diphenhydramine, the active ingredient in Benadryl, and several over-the-counter sleep aids. The levels were elevated, not dangerously so on a single night, she explained, but consistent with repeated use over a prolonged period. In a child of 38 pounds, administered regularly over months, the cumulative effects could include chronic fatigue, memory disruption, difficulty concentrating, and in some cases, developmental delays in attention and retention. She paused and looked directly at me. "Mr. Calloway," she said, "this is not an accident. This level of consistency over this duration does not happen by mistake." I already knew that. I think I had known it since my granddaughter said the words on the back porch steps. But hearing a doctor say it out loud in a small room under fluorescent lights made it real in a way that nothing else had. My hands were flat on the table. I looked at them like they belonged to someone else. "What happens now?" I asked. She told me she had already placed the call to Children's Protective Services. A caseworker would be in contact within 24 hours. She told me I should not return my granddaughter to the home tonight. She gave me the number for the Family Advocacy Center. She told me to call my son. That last part was the one I had been dreading. My son is 36 years old. He works in logistics, long hours, early mornings. He is a good man. He is not a complicated man. He loves his daughter the way good fathers do, completely and without question. He had been with my daughter-in-law for 9 years. They married when my granddaughter was 1 year old. I sat in the parking lot of the urgent care clinic with my granddaughter in the back seat, eating the peanut butter crackers the nurse had sent with us, and I called my son. He picked up on the second ring. I could hear the noise of a warehouse behind him. I told him I needed him to find somewhere quiet. He was quiet for 5 seconds. Then I heard a door close, and the warehouse noise disappeared. I told him everything. I started with what my granddaughter had said on the porch steps. I told him about the urgent care, the talk screen, the results, the doctor's words. I told him about CPS. I told him I had not brought his daughter back to the house, and that I was not going to. He did not speak for a very long time after I finished. "Say that again," he said. "The thing about the test." I said it again. There was a sound on his end of the phone that I don't have a word for. It was not crying exactly. It was something that comes before crying, when the body understands something that the mind is still refusing. "I'm leaving right now," he said. I told him to meet me at my house. I told him not to go home first. He asked why. I told him because I needed him to hear the rest of what I had to say before he did anything at all. He agreed. I don't think he would have agreed 5 minutes later. He arrived at my house in 40 minutes. He must have been doing 90 on the highway. He came through the front door and went straight to his daughter, who was sitting at my kitchen table with a glass of chocolate milk and my old collection of field guides spread out in front of her, looking at birds. He sat down beside her and pulled her close and held her in a way that I had to look away from. I went to the kitchen and stood at the window for a while. When he came to find me, his daughter was asleep on the couch under the quilt my wife had made 20 years ago, the one with the blue and yellow squares. His eyes were red, but he was steady. My son is like me in that way. He holds himself together when he needs to. He falls apart later, in private. He asked me why. That was the question I had been turning over since the parking lot. Why would a woman drug her own child, repeatedly, for months? The answer came partly from what my granddaughter told us over the following days, in careful sessions with the CPS caseworker and the child advocate. It came partly from what the investigation uncovered. And it came partly from something my daughter-in-law had said to a neighbor, apparently, which the neighbor mentioned to the caseworker without being asked. She had been bringing someone home in the evenings. Not every evening, but regularly. On the nights my son worked late, which was 3 or 4 nights a week, she had been giving my granddaughter the juice an hour before. And by the time the guest arrived, my granddaughter was deeply asleep and stayed that way until morning. She had not wanted a witness. She had used her own child as a problem to be managed. My son sat at my kitchen table with his hands folded and his jaw tight, and he asked me what he was supposed to do with that information. Not in a desperate way. In a very quiet, very specific way, like a man reading the instructions for something he had never had to do before and could not afford to get wrong. I told him that he was going to do exactly what needed to be done for his daughter, one thing at a time. Starting tonight, he nodded. He looked at the window. Then he said, "I don't understand how I didn't see it." I told him that was not the question he needed to be asking right now. I told him that later, when his daughter was safe and the legal process was underway, he could spend all the time he wanted on that question. But right now, the only thing that mattered was her. He nodded again. The CPS caseworker came to my house the following morning. She was a composed woman in her 40s who had clearly sat in many kitchens exactly like mine, delivering exactly this kind of news to exactly this kind of family. She was not cold, but she was not soft either. She asked my granddaughter questions the way the doctor had, gently, sideways, letting the child lead. My granddaughter didn't understand entirely what was happening. She knew something was different. She knew she was not going home. She asked, once, if she had done something wrong. The caseworker told her no. She said it firmly and without hesitation, and I was grateful for that more than I could say. My daughter-in-law was interviewed by CPS and then by police. She denied everything at first. She said my granddaughter must have gotten into the medicine cabinet. She said she had no idea what had been happening. She said I was a meddling old man who had always disapproved of her. That last part, at least, was partially true. But the tox screen told a story that her explanations couldn't cover. The levels were too consistent, too regular. The child's own account was too specific. There was the bottle of diphenhydramine liquid found in the back of the kitchen cabinet, behind the olive oil and the vinegar, with a measuring dropper tucked beneath it. There were the dates, months of them, that aligned with the nights my son worked late. She was charged with child endangerment and reckless endangerment of a child. She was also charged with contributing to the delinquency of a minor, which I was told was a lesser charge but carried its own weight. Her attorney argued the charges were excessive. The prosecutor disagreed. I was not in the room for most of those conversations, but I was kept informed. My son filed for divorce 11 days after I brought my granddaughter to the urgent care clinic. He did it without drama and without hesitation, the same way he approached every other necessary thing in his life. He moved into a short-term rental 2 miles from my house while the legal proceedings sorted themselves out. My granddaughter stayed with me. Those months, the fall, the winter, were not easy. They were not uncomplicated. My granddaughter had nightmares for a while. She asked questions I didn't always have good answers to. She asked why her mom had done it. She asked if her mom still loved her. She asked if she was ever going back to the house with the tire swing. I tried to answer as honestly as I could while protecting her from things she was too young to carry. I told her that sometimes grown-ups make terrible choices, and those choices have nothing to do with how lovable you are. I told her she was one of the most lovable people I had ever known in my 63 years on this earth, and I had known a lot of people. I told her that her dad loved her more than he loved anything. I told her that I loved her more than I had words for. She would nod, very seriously. The way she nodded at things she was still processing, but not quite ready to question. Then she'd go back to her field guides or her drawings or whatever she was doing, and I'd watch her and think about what it meant to be small in a world where the people who are supposed to keep you safe sometimes turn out to be the source of the harm. I thought about my wife a lot during those months. I wondered what she would have said to our granddaughter. I thought she would have known the exact right words. She always did. I made do with what I had. By January, the worst of the legal machinery had moved into position and was grinding forward. My daughter-in-law's attorney negotiated a plea agreement. She pleaded guilty to 1 count of child endangerment. She received a suspended sentence, mandatory parenting classes, and 2 years of supervised probation. She was prohibited from unsupervised contact with my granddaughter until further court review. I will not pretend that felt like enough. I know my son didn't feel it was enough. I sat with him the evening after the plea was entered, and we both stared at the wall for a while without saying much. What I said eventually was that the court had done what the court could do, and that protecting my granddaughter from this point forward was our job, not the court's. He agreed. He got full physical custody. Visitation for his ex-wife was to be supervised, by court order, for the foreseeable future. He moved into a house in a quiet neighborhood in Westerville in early March. A 2-bedroom place with a yard and a big oak tree out back that my granddaughter immediately declared perfect for a tire swing. We put one up together on a Saturday afternoon in April, my son, my granddaughter, and me. My son did most of the physical work. My granddaughter supervised, very seriously, standing with her arms crossed and pointing at the branch and telling us the rope needed to be longer. I watched the two of them and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter and more durable than happiness. The feeling that something had been pulled back from the edge. I was with my granddaughter when she had her follow-up with the pediatric specialist in February. They ran a full developmental assessment to check for any lasting effects from the months of sedation. The doctor, a calm man with silver hair, who reminded me a little of myself, went through the results with my son and me while my granddaughter sat in the waiting room with a coloring book. He said her cognitive function was within normal range. He said her attention scores were slightly below the midpoint for her age, but not alarmingly so, and that with normal development and no further interference, he expected those numbers to normalize. He said children were resilient in ways that still surprised him after 30 years of practice. I asked him directly, would there be lasting damage? He looked at me steadily. He said he could not make guarantees. He said the most important factors now were stability, routine, the presence of loving and attentive caregivers, and time. I told him she had all of those things. He said, then I'd say her prognosis is good. I drove home from that appointment alone. My son had taken my granddaughter for ice cream after, and I sat in my driveway for a few minutes before going inside. The oak tree in my own backyard was just starting to bud, pale green against the gray March sky. I thought about my wife. I thought about the Tuesday morning in October when a small girl in a backyard asked her grandfather a question that changed everything. I thought about how close it had come to not being asked. How many more months might have passed? How much harder it might have been to undo? I don't have a clean way to explain what I felt. Relief is part of it. Anger is still part of it. I suspect it always will be, when I let myself go to that place. Grief, too, for what my granddaughter went through without any of us knowing, for the mornings she woke up foggy and confused and thought that was simply how mornings were. But underneath all of it, something I can only call gratitude. That she trusted me enough to say the words. That she reached for her grandfather on a porch step on an October afternoon and handed me the thing she didn't have the words to fully explain, and trusted that I would know what to do with it. I spent most of my adult life building things designed to hold weight. Bridges, mostly, to road structures. The work of calculating how much stress a system can bear before it fails. I retired 5 years ago, and I thought that kind of thinking was behind me. It turns out you never stop doing those calculations. You just start applying them to different things. My granddaughter got her golden retriever in May. She named him Chester. He is enormous and ridiculous, and he sleeps at the foot of her bed every night and follows her from room to room like she is the most important thing in any space she enters. She is, of course. She always was. I see them every Sunday now. I drive over to my son's house in Westerville, and we have dinner together. The three of us and Chester, and my granddaughter tells me about school and her friends and what Chester did that week that was either very funny or very bad, usually both. She is catching up. Her teachers say she's engaged, attentive, bright. She remembers things now the way children are supposed to remember things. I watch her at the table on those Sunday evenings, and I think about something I said to my son in the worst of it, when he was sitting across from me in my kitchen with his hands folded, asking what he was supposed to do. One thing at a time, starting tonight. It's not complicated advice. It's not wise in any extraordinary way. But it's the only approach I know that actually works when everything around you is falling apart. You don't fix it all at once. You do the next necessary thing, then the one after that. You keep your eyes on the person you are doing it for, and you don't stop. My granddaughter asked me something once, not long after everything had settled, on one of our Sunday evenings when my son had stepped out to deal with something, and it was just the two of us at the kitchen table. She asked if I had been scared when she told me about the juice. I thought about lying. I thought about giving her the comfortable grandfather answer. Then I thought about who she was and what she had already been through and what she deserved from me. I told her yes. I told her I had been terrified. She considered that for a moment, running her finger along the edge of the table the way she does when she's thinking. Then she said, "But you didn't act scared." "No," I told her. "I didn't." She nodded slowly. "Is that what you're supposed to do when you're scared?" I thought about it honestly. I told her that when someone you love needs you, being scared is allowed. Letting the scared stop you is not. I told her that's not something you're born knowing. It's something you have to practice, over and over, until it becomes the thing you do without thinking. She was quiet for a minute. Chester put his enormous head on her knee. "Okay," she said. "I'll practice." She is 8 years old. She has already been through more than most people twice her age. And she sat at my kitchen table on a Sunday evening and told me she would practice being brave. I don't know if she understood how much that meant to me. I hope, when she is older and looks back on that night, she knows. I drove home that evening the long way, through the neighborhoods I used to drive through with my wife on fall evenings when we had nowhere we needed to be and the night was warm enough to keep the windows down. The street lights were on, the yards were green. Somewhere a few blocks over, a dog was barking at something. I thought about what it takes to look at a small person and decide, without hesitation, that their safety is worth whatever it costs you. I thought about how that should be the easiest calculation in the world and how, for some people, it isn't. Then I thought about my granddaughter's face on the back porch steps in October. The way she looked up at me and said the 7 words. The way she had trusted, without even knowing she was trusting, that I would hear her. I heard her. That is the only thing I am certain I did right. Everything else followed from that. If you have someone small in your life, a grandchild, a child, a niece or nephew or neighbor kid who comes around and something they say doesn't sit right with you, don't wait. Don't tell yourself you're overreacting. Don't decide the disruption isn't worth it, or the family tension isn't worth it, or the uncertainty isn't worth it. Ask the question, make the call, take them to the doctor. Be the person they trusted you to be when they said the words. Because they are saying the words. They are always saying the words, one way or another. We just have to be willing to stop and listen.